Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to be doing my 2021 wrap-up. So I will go over the stats of all the books I read, we'll talk through it. I have a chai latte here because I'm gonna need something to drink so that my voice doesn't die in this video. So sit back, relax, grab something delicious to drink, and let's get into the 2021 wrap-up. Alright, so first I want to tell you the grand total of books that I read in 2021. So my Goodreads goal was to read 100 books, and I read 102 books in 2021. Those last two were just because I read some graphic novels at the end, so I really got to squeak in those last two. But either way, I completed my Goodreads challenge. I read 100 books, which was very exciting. So let's jump right into some stats about my reading in 2021. This is a graph which shows the number of books I read in each month in 2021. March was my highest reading month and I read 13 books. And in the months of June, August, and September, I only read 5 books each month. So clearly in March, I read a lot. I had a couple of readathons I did in March, and I guess I just had more time. But as the months went by, I read less and less because life got busier and busier. But that's okay. I still had, overall, a very good reading year. The shortest book that I read this year was Flat Stanley at 48 pages. And my longest read of 2021 was A Little Life by Hanya Yanagihara at 814 pages. So this was a long boy. This was very intimidating. It was quite a process to read. Got it done faster than I expected. I expected it to take like an entire month. Read this in the first week and a half of September. So that was an achievement to say the least. This was a book that I did not want to take with me on my TBR for another year. So I'm really happy that I finally read it, even though it is a behemoth. So let's talk about my star ratings in 2021. So I have found that I am a very high rater, and what I've found is that a lot of times if I liked a book but didn't love it, I'll just slap a 4 stars onto it, and then as I think about it, and I think about how little I've thought about it since I read it, it often gets pushed down to a 3-star because it is such a middling kind of book. And I, for some reason, rate it higher rather than rating it 3 stars. Maybe I'm just too nice. But that aside, I did rate quite a few books very highly. I rated 46.1% of my reads 5 stars, 35.3% of my reads 4 stars, 10.8% 3 stars, 6.9% 2 stars, and only 1% 1 star. So as you can see, there's a very clear preference for rating higher, and I think some of this is just down to the fact that I have my reading preferences so well honed in that I choose books most often that are things that I think I will really like and I end up really liking. So maybe it's just that, or maybe it was just a really fantastic reading year. Either way, I am so thrilled that I had that many 5 stars. I think it was like 47 5 stars, so that's pretty incredible. Alright, moving on to some stats about the genre breakdown of my reading in 2021. So as I anticipated, a large portion of my reading in 2021 kind of fit into the general fiction category, being 22.5% of my reads. Coming in second, we have children's literature with 17.6%, probably just because of all of the Wings of Fire books that I read in 2021. Next, we have short stories, which came in at 14.7% of my reading. Then we have thriller/horror at 11.8%, nonfiction at 9.8%, sci-fi fantasy at 7.8%, graphic novels at 5.9%, classics at 5.9%, and YA at 3.9%. So not a lot of YA reads this year, which is unsurprising since I'm kind of moving away from YA and towards adult fiction. So honestly, none of those stats were really surprising apart from nonfiction. I didn't realize that I read as many nonfiction as I did, which is good. I really like getting to read nonfiction and learning new things, but the rest of the stats were pretty predictable. So 2021 was the year that I found translated literature. So literature that was written in another language and then translated to English for people like me who only speak English to read. So that became a huge portion of my reading. I honestly thought that translated literature would be a bigger portion of my reading, but it turns out that 83.3% of my reads in 2021 were originally written in English, while 16.7% were translated. So that is a decent chunk of my reading, but I definitely want to get that chunk a lot higher in 2022. So breaking the translated literature down more specifically, we have a couple of different languages of origin that I read from. So most of the translated literature that I read in 2021 was translated from Spanish at 41.2%. Coming in second is Japanese with 29.4%. And finally, we have Italian, Icelandic, and French all at 5.9%. So as I said, most of the translated literature that I read in 2021 was either translated from Spanish or Japanese. So I definitely favored those two languages when I was choosing translated literature. But my favorite book of 2021 was translated from a different language. So stay tuned for my favorite books of 2021 video where I will let you know what that book was. All right, we talked about how great of a reading year it was. Now let's talk about the books that I didn't like. So first of all, let's talk about the books that I had really high hopes for and that did not deliver on those expectations at all. I have 3 books in this category. The first is Milkfed by Melissa Broder. So I read The Pisces for the first time a while ago, maybe 2 years ago, and absolutely fell in love with it. I loved that book so much. It is so disgusting and weird and amazing. So when I saw that Melissa Broder had written another novel, I was over the moon excited. And this one just didn't live up to the expectations at all. So I was expecting a lot of weirdness, and I think this one was just sort of too in the middle. It wasn't overly weird to the point where it feels really stylistic, and it wasn't realistic enough to be a regular contemporary book. It was kind of in this middle ground, and I don't think that it provided any kind of shock value or craziness or weirdness. If I had read this without the Pisces in mind, maybe I would have liked it more because it wasn't like an objectively bad book, but it just didn't live up to what I remembered the Pisces being like. And after I read this, I ended up rereading the Pisces in 2021 because I just wanted some of that back, because this just wasn't what I wanted at all. Another case of a book not living up to the author's hype. This one is Death in Her Hands by Ottessa Moshfegh. So I've talked about Moshfegh on my channel a lot. I really like some of her other books like Eileen and My Year of Rest and Relaxation. Eileen is my favorite by her, but this one came out last year, I believe, and it just wasn't good. I didn't like the narrator. I didn't like where the story was going. It was weird, but not in a way that I could connect to. And at times it was just really boring. So this one did not hit the mark. So yeah, not a fan of Death in Her Hands. Unfortunately, I will not be purchasing this to add to my Moshfegh collection because not a fan. And finally, we have a book that none of you have probably ever heard of, and that is Applewhite's Coast to Coast by Stephanie S. Tolan and R.J. Tolan. So I've talked about one of my favorite books, Surviving the Applewhites, on this channel before, and it ended up being the first book in sort of a trilogy. The second book is Applewhites at Wit's End, which I also read this year and really enjoyed, though that was a reread. I have read that one before. This one is the third book in the little series, which I haven't read before, and I hated it. I thought it was boring. I thought it was stupid. I thought that the characters in this book were entirely one-dimensional and the choices they made were ridiculous. And it's one thing coming from a background of middle grade and saying, obviously these characters aren't going to be as rich as an adult book, but honestly, I don't believe that entirely. There are so many middle grade books where I connect to characters more than I connect to characters in adult books or YA books. So I think children's literature has the capacity to make you connect to the characters and connect to the story even if you are an adult. This just wasn't it, especially coming from how much I love Surviving the Applewhites and seeing how well-developed and rich those characters are, and then coming here where the characters no longer feel anything like what I remember. So This was incredibly disappointing. So I don't have a lot to say about the books that I DNF'd other than I just wasn't vibing with them and didn't like them, but I will list off the books that I DNF'd. And just a disclaimer, if I hated slash DNF'd a book that you love, it is absolutely nothing against you. We all have our own opinions on books, and all of them are totally valid. These are just books that I did not enjoy, so I didn't want to continue reading them. So first is The Hierarchies by Ross Anderson, Don't Cry by Mary Gateskill, which is unfortunate because I really liked some of Mary Gateskill's other stuff. I read 2 books by her this year and loved both of them. I just really wasn't vibing with the stories in Don't Cry, but it was unfortunate because coming off of reading some of her other stuff, I had high hopes for Don't Cry. I also DNF'd Of Vengeance by J.D. Curtness, and also McGlue by Otessa Moshfegh, which I read the first few pages of and absolutely hated. So unfortunately, it was not a good Moshfegh year for me. And then we have Long Live the Posthorn by Vigdis Hjorth, which is a translated book. There's No Such Thing as an Easy Job by Kikuko Sumera. This is a Japanese translated book that I tried to love and just didn't. And finally, Felt in the Jaw by Kristen Arnett, which is also very unfortunate because I had read 2 other books by Arnett and absolutely loved them. She became a favorite this year, and I just really didn't like her short story collection, so very unfortunate. All right, let's talk rereads. So this year, 88.2% of the books I read were new to me, and 11.8% were rereads. So that is quite a few rereads, but I did want to mention 3 books that I actually read twice within 2021. The first one was a reread from previously, and that is The Fault in Our Stars by John Green, my favorite book. I finished this in January. I was just doing my own reread and I annotated it, and then I proceeded to read it aloud to my boyfriend over the phone throughout a couple more months in 2021. So I read this fully through twice in 2021. And then the next 2 are books that I read early in the year and then came back to at the end of the year. The first one is The Lost Continent by Tui T. Sutherland. This is book 11 in the Wings of Fire series, and I read most of the series in early 2021. And I just wanted to come back to this because book 5 in the series is coming out in April of 2022. So I'm doing a little reread of this arc in the series. And then I also read Sharp Objects by Gillian Flynn twice in 2021. I read this first as part of my Reading Noelle Gallagher's Favorite Books video, so I wanted to give this one a shot because she had recommended it, and I absolutely loved it. I gave it 5 stars, I read it in a day, and then I ended up recommending this to a book club that I'm participating in / running, so I just reread it for the book club as well. And it is a fantastic book, highly recommend. Obviously I loved it, I read it twice this year. So next I have my pick for the prettiest book of the year, and I chose The Tea Dragon Society by Kay O'Neill. Not only is the cover stunning, but because this is a graphic novel, we get so much time to enjoy the art of this book. It is absolutely gorgeous. The dragons are so cute, the art style is just so stunning, and I enjoyed every minute of reading this book, as well as the other books in the series, which I also read this year. And finally, we have my books acquired stat. So this year was a very heavy book buying year. I started buying quite a few books back in 2020. We went into lockdown and I didn't buy any books for the first month and a half or so of lockdown, but then May hit and I bought all of the books. So it really hasn't slowed down a ton since then, but with the pace that I have been reading and the amount of books that I'm excited about, I end up buying quite a few books. So my grand total of books that I acquired, whether I purchased them or received them as gifts or however I ended up getting them, I acquired 119 books this year. Sounds like a lot, it is a lot. I also acquired another bookshelf for myself because damn, I have a lot of books now. But I recently did a pretty hefty unhaul, which helped a lot, and I have just been trying to rearrange so that I have enough space. That's one thing I did a lot in 2021. I rearranged my shelves countless times. I love rearranging my shelves. It's so much fun, and I just have the impulse to rearrange them almost constantly, and I just have to hold myself back and just try to appreciate the setup that I have going already. But those are all of the books that I acquired in 2021. So overall, it was a very good reading year. I definitely had some better months than others, but I read so many 5-star books, so many 4-star books, and I now have so many more favorites to add to my repertoire. So that is my 2021 reading wrap up. I hope you enjoyed this video, and I hope you enjoyed the content that I produced in 2021. I had so many ideas, and I was so excited to fully jump into making content this past year. And because of that, I saw so much growth on YouTube and on Instagram, and I gathered such a wonderful community together. So thank you so much for being part of this community and for making it what it is. It is so wonderful to get to talk to you guys and to have a community to talk about books with. So thank you so much for being here this past year, and thank you for making 2021 a really great year. If you enjoyed this video, feel free to like and subscribe, and I will see you in the next one. Bye.